person on the board. I'll start again. Good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Mitchell. I'm the communications point person on the board for Northern California Labor Employment Relations Association. And we have a program today, which is very exciting. It's a report from the front lines of labor relations in the federal sector. So it's an important sector in Northern California. We have thousands of federal workers that work in our communities, specifically down in the South Bay and Mountain View, at NASA and at the Environmental Protection Agency in San Francisco, as well as various administrative agencies such as immigration, Social Security, and other sectors in the Bay Area. So one of the most important unions in the federal sector is the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers, and they're especially important in our Northern California region where they represent thousands and thousands of our most important workers throughout the region. So we're really privileged to have the international president, Mr. Matt Biggs, joining us, along with Faraz Khan, the legislative director, and we're going to be joined also by Teresa Ellis, their general counsel. And they're going to give us a little information about what's going on currently and give us a perspective about how labor advocates are reacting to the actions and inactions of the current administration. So welcome, Matt and Faraz, and we'll look forward to seeing Teresa when she joins. Mr. President Biggs, could you give us a little primer on what's happening in federal labor relations today? It's just such a dynamic situation. It's hard for those of us in the lay community to keep up with everything that's happening, and we'd like to hear directly from you your experience as the president of one of our important federal sector locals unions.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Again, thanks for the invite for IFPTE. Appreciate it, Mark. Mark's an IFPTE brother, comrade, former IFPTE Local 20, and honored to work with you, Mark. Special shout out to Bianca and Mark from Local 21 as well. Just want to thank them for being on this meeting and for the great solidarity that Local 21 has provided to all of IFPTE's federal sector. And just everyone here on this Zoom meeting, thanks for being on and thanks for the support. Whether you're union or not, we're in a situation here with an administration that is aiming to completely dismantle the federal government as we know it today. Where things stand in labor relations. Well, I'll just answer it. First, I'll start at the top. OPM, Office of Personnel Management. It's kind of like the HR arm of the federal government at the very top level. When President Trump came into office, he and his co-president at the time, Elon Musk, they took over OPM. That's the first agency they went into, and they took it over and got access to all of the records of every federal employee and pretty much every federal retiree. They used OPM.
Matt, what is OPM?
I'm sorry, Office of Personnel Management. So I should note too that the first Trump administration tried to actually shutter OPM and do away with OPM. They had 4 years to plan their attack on the federal workforce, and they decided that they were going to use OPM as a blunt instrument against federal workers. So that's what they did. The original, if folks remember, I can't remember the day this thing came out, but I think I was watching. I don't know. I think I was watching the NCAA championship or something like that. But OPM sent an email out to every single federal employee encouraging them to quit their jobs at the federal government. It's called the Fork in the Road email. So the answer to that question, Mark, of where things stand in labor relations with the federal government, with OPM, it's non-existent. Well, it's bad. They do not communicate with unions. And if they did, it would be a negative communication. So I'll just say that. Within some of the agencies where we represent members, and there's a lot of them, I'll say at the Department of Defense and Navy in particular, they've been quite good to deal with. They are taking a slow road approach to what this administration is trying to implement. The administration's latest executive order came on March 27th, And that was the executive order that stripped over 1 million federal employees of their collective bargaining rights under the guise of national security, which is ridiculous. Um, but that executive order stripped, and many of them are IFPTEs, federal sector. Most of our people are DoD members. You know that, Mark. So just with a stroke of a pen, we most of our federal sector lost their collective bargaining rights. We also lost our dues deduction, payroll dues deduction, by the way, in that executive order. Now, I will say the Department of Navy they're taking a slow approach to implementing that executive order because there's multiple lawsuits. Teresa will talk about that when she gets on. Multiple lawsuits to overturn that executive order and block it. So DoD, at least Navy, has been pretty good. Um, Now, I will say out there in the Bay Area where we represent EPA, NASA, uh, Army Corps, and NOAA, EPA in particular has hit the ground running in implementing Trump's draconian agenda. So, with EPA, labor relations are dismal. NASA, not so good either. IFPTE is NASA's biggest union, federal employee union. We represent about 8,000. NASA is currently implementing a Trump budget that cuts NASA science by almost 50%, and NASA's overall budget by 25%. They are encouraging people to leave in droves, and they're actually doing it effectively. I think 2,600 NASA employees are leaving. They only have 18,000 federal employees. NOAA also hitting the ground running and implementing the executive order. Army Corps is kind of a mixed bag for us, maybe has more information on that.
What is NOAA, Matt?
NOAA is the National Association of National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association. Um, and we have a NOAA group out on the West Coast as well. And also our NASA Local 30s out at NASA Ames, out there at Moffett Field. So in most places it's challenging. Fortunately, at the Navy, where we represent all four of the Navy shipyards around the country. They're approaching it in a thoughtful manner.
Thank you, Matt. I have a question for Faraz. Faraz, what are the presidential directives and executive branch actions that are affecting labor relations today, and what, if any, strategies exist to protect workers' rights?
Yeah, Mark, that is the all important question I think you're asking here, and I'll try not to take up the whole hour here answering it. But so there's several, but I think we can sort of group them together or talk about a few of them here that sort of cover the scope of what we're dealing with, and I think it might make sense to also go somewhat in chronological order. But with the start of the Trump administration, you know. Day one, we anticipated the rollout of a number of executive actions, presidential directives to federal agencies that would go after federal employees and really start to tear back the civil service protections, the nonpartisan, apolitical basis of the civil service, competitive hiring, things like that. The very first out of the gate on January 20th, OPM, Office of Personnel Management, as Matt mentioned, issued a guidance memorandum that went to all federal agencies to submit lists of probationary employees. And it also OPM reminded agencies in that memo that probationary employees can be dismissed without triggering appeal rights. The outcome of that was uneven across agencies. It wasn't directly that agencies started taking the strong hint in the guidance memo and firing federal probationary federal employees across the board, but some agencies moved quick. Other agencies sort of took steps, submitted those those lists to OPM, and then we haven't really seen any follow up. But as a practical matter, for instance, Matt mentioned NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric uh, uh, Administration. Our membership there at the Alaska and Northwest Fisheries, and also at the NOAA Emergency Response Division, took an immediate hit. They were, we had probationary employees, a small number of probationary employees that were actually critical to like just making sure that NOAA had the numbers to get the job done. This is, doing fish population surveys that support commercial fishing. And also there's, people there that are liaisons to tribal governments, to local communities, to various fishing interests. All of a sudden, just a small number of probationary employees being fired really set back the work that NOAA could do, the planning they could do, just their ability to just carry out their basic functions. Part of it is also the fact that probationary employees in the federal government aren't just new hires that have that 1 year probationary term. It's a lot of people that are moving into new positions that also have a 1 year probationary term. And also, keep in mind that there's a lot of people that come with a lot of expertise into their roles in the federal government. So, in one particular instance, I know that there was somebody at NOAA's Emergency Response Division that had 2 decades of expertise. They were considered a subject matter expert in the field of how to handle hazardous waste spills, petrochemical spills, in the ocean and nearby shorelines. That's a person that's that made the choice to work for the federal government, leave the private sector to work for the federal government, and they were dismissed. Didn't do anything wrong. It was not over performance reasons. It was just that they were easy to dismiss. So that's one place where you see just like the tremendous loss of talent, waste of resources. In an instance like that, one of the more powerful things we can do is to make sure that there is a recognition. I do the legislative work, legislative advocacy for our union, but make sure that there's a recognition amongst lawmakers that the resources they're sending to federal agencies, the authorities and appropriated funding that they're sending is having a nil impact or a negative impact when it's being squandered this way, right? It's there's a significant amount of money put into recruiting people, and it's being wasted. The other place where we're seeing probationary employees fired, really just day in, day out right now, is at the immigration court. Immigration judges are being fired for what looks like to make examples and to apply political pressure. Right now, it seems like it's clear that the firing of immigration judge classes that were hired in the previous administration is meant to really just be a disruptive signal to the existing immigration judge corps at the Department of Justice. And again, just pointing out the fact that this is entirely counterproductive and wasteful. This is not about efficiencies. This is about agenda setting and sending messages, sending political messages very inappropriately. So that's day one. And again, I'll try to move this a little quicker, but not too long after that, we saw an executive order called Implementing the President's Department of Government Efficiency Workforce Optimization Initiative. This is a plan where the executive branch tells agencies to submit reduction in force and reorganization plans. And generally in the federal government, you have reductions in force when there's a budget cut in the current government funding, the appropriations. If there's a need for reorganization because of some type of emergency, if there's a need to reorganize the work after the reorganization, you sort of have a RIF. This is capricious, right? This is basically being driven by a top-down directive rather than really sort of coming out of a cut to the budget. The other thing about this RIF and reorg executive order is agencies have submitted their RIF and reorg plans, reduction in force and reorganization plans, to the Office of Management and Budget, OMB. However, we have unions, anybody that's filed a FOIA, and I think at this point also federal courts have not seen these RIF and reorg plans, despite our requests for them at the bargaining table. We've argued that we have a particularized need to see those plans. and the agencies have said, no, you don't. So we haven't seen those plans. We don't know what's in them. We don't know the rationale, and we have a very strong suspicion that if RIFs are carried out, wide-scale RIFs are carried out, they won't be carried out according to the regulations on how they should be done, and according to the statute as well on how they should be done. So we're very concerned that there's illegality and lawlessness baked into this the RIF and reorg plans. And we're also supposed to be able to bargain over these as well, right? So it's again, we're not getting very far on any of this. The one thing I will say is that on this, we have been talking to Congress, as have other federal unions, on making sure that there is funding for the federal government going forward in the next fiscal year, so that there is not a need for reductions in force. One example at NASA, this is frustrating and confounding us, is that we see NASA leadership continually telling the civil service workforce that they should be taking the next opportunity they have to leave the civil service, because the president's budget request is going to cut almost 25% of NASA's budget. That budget request has to be approved by Congress. Congress appropriates funds. It's a constitutionally defined role. But NASA is acting as if they get to basically adopt the president's budget, which they don't. And as of this week, the Senate has a draft NASA budget that they've passed out of their appropriations committee that continues the current year's funding level. So there's no 25%, 24% budget cut for NASA. The House has passed a similar budget, or the House Appropriations Committee rather, has a similar bill as well. So again, Congress, on a bipartisan basis, is rejecting the president's budget request, at least for NASA and a few other agencies. But agencies are acting as if they can go ahead and implement and act on the budget request, force the federal workers out the door, go about it that way. And then I'll just add two more things here real quickly. So the executive order on Schedule PC, this is the executive order that basically refreshes what was Schedule F in the first Trump administration. This is really designed to create a civil service that is not accountable to the public, but sort of really held accountable to the loyalty of the leadership of the executive branch. Basically, agencies have to create these inventories of positions that touch policy. That's the justification for moving civil service competitively hired positions to this new schedule, which are appointments, executive branch appointments. So instead of being open and competitive positions where you have to, have a merit process that determines who gets the government job, these would be jobs that are now under a new schedule, a new classification. That's in the accepted service, not the competitive service. That's really sort of going pretty far back and rolling back our civil service system to towards the late 1800s, before the passage of the Pendleton Act of 1881. This is tied up in rulemaking right now. There's I don't know exactly how many comments were submitted in the rulemaking, but the Office of Personnel Management has the rule. We don't know when they're going to be moving to final rule, but they should be considering the flood of comments that they received for that notice of proposed rulemaking on that. Part of the reason why we're able to delay it a little bit also, to have the executive branch of the Trump administration go through a rulemaking process on this, is because in 2024, during the Biden administration, OPM created a rule. They went through the lengthy normal rulemaking process to create a rule to reinforce the competitive service, anticipating the possibility that a Trump administration would go after the competitive service, and issue a new Schedule F or this time Schedule PC. And then just yesterday, there was a new schedule called Schedule G that was issued by executive order. This is basically meant to get around the limitation on the number of non-career temporary presidential appointments in the senior executive schedule, the senior executive class. So this new schedule basically is meant to flood the federal government with partisan hires. There's a cap right now on that number. I believe it's 4,000. And then very last thing, and I know we've been talking for a while here, but this is possibly the most important one for us and for a lot of federal unions, and really sort of just
Could you speak up a little bit for us?
Yeah, sure. This is the one that I think probably matters quite a bit here. This is the direct attack on federal employees and their collective bargaining rights. A recent executive order, this was actually, I guess it's not that recent, it was late March, called the Exclusions from the Federal Labor Management Relations Program, targets something over 1 million federal employees at 18 agencies, 1 million employees at 18 agencies that would lose their collective bargaining rights once this is fully implemented, under the provision of the law in Title V, Chapter 71, that allows the executive branch for very narrow national security reasons to remove collective bargaining rights, to exclude collective bargaining rights for national security purposes. This is meant to be used in very limited circumstances. When the law was passed by Congress in 1978, it was not meant to be this sweeping power that a president could apply across over 1 million workers in across the federal government. But this goes after collective bargaining rights at the Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, EPA, Justice Department, several other agencies. It's also got exclusions for a number of law enforcement agencies and components. Makes it seem pretty clear, along with statements that have come out from the executive branch. So it makes it pretty clear that this is meant to be targeted and retaliatory. So this is the big one, right? This is the one that really just takes away collective bargaining rights, and really shrinks the power of federal labor unions. Right now in Congress, we have a bill called the Protecting America's Workforce Act that has 222 sponsors. It has Republican co-sponsors, has the majority of the House of Representatives supporting it. It's not going to get a vote unless there is a discharge petition. That's a process, just exactly as it sounds. It's a petition to discharge the bill, to put it on the floor of the House of Representatives. That discharge petition is underway right now, and the real goal here is to get the Republicans that signed on to support and co-sponsor the bill to sign on to the discharge petition to follow and take the next step there, and that would put the bill on the House floor. It would certainly create a tough moment for House Speaker Mike Johnson, and we're pushing for that. Also, this just happened this week in the House of Representatives. The National Defense Authorization Act was considered in the House Armed Services Committee, and with 3 Republicans on that committee helping out, Democrats were able to get an amendment to the House NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, that excludes Department of Defense from taking away collective bargaining rights under this executive order. So that's also another promising sign. That still leaves 17 other agencies that would be exposed to the executive order, but we're working on both those issues.
All right, thank you, Faraz. We'll keep our eyes open for news on those 2 developments. The IFPTE General Counsel, Teresa Ellis, has joined us. Teresa, welcome. Could you introduce yourself to the folks here?
Sure. Hi, Mark. Thanks, Mark. And hi, everybody. My name is Teresa Ellis. I am General Counsel for IFPTE, with Matt as our president and Faraz as our legislative director. Gay's here also, our secretary treasurer. So we all work together at IFPTE. I've been there for over 15 years now, and I've been in, union side counsel for my entire legal career.
Well, Teresa, I have a question for you. Are there legal strategies that have or can be used to support labor rights in the federal workplace under the current regime we have?
Um, I guess the short answer is it depends. I know that's a very lawyer answer. So what we've been advising our locals and our membership is, we as a union still believe in, the fact that the statutes as written, are in effect, and our unions and our locals, still exist, right? Despite the fact that our dues deductions have been taken away, and despite the fact that there are executive orders that purport to take away collective bargaining from a lot of our agencies that where we have represented workers. So in our eyes, we still have unions there. Those unions still have members and officers, and we are telling our unions continue to function as if you still have a union because you do. I mean, the mere fact that you have to, um, pay your dues a different way, or you know, have different ways of communicating in the workplace, maybe not being allowed to use government email anymore, just, or being told that your collective bargaining agreement may or may not be in effect. What we're telling people is don't let that stop you. You do have a right to have a union in your workplace. And so kind of along those lines, we are advising our members and locals to, try to hold agencies, feet to the fire when it comes to enforcing contracts, right? If they have contracts, you keep on filing your grievances. Make sure that if you have members, or if the agency is, say violating something under the contract, go file those grievances, and continue to act as if you have a contract in place. Because at some point, there is a lot of litigation going through the courts, and we want to make sure that we hold and maintain, our positions once that litigation comes to an end. So that's what we're telling our locals. And then kind of at the 30,000 foot level from what's, kind of percolating through agencies under collective bargaining agreements. And some of those still are going to arbitration, right? Like some grievances are still going to arbitration or mediation. And some agencies, as Matt said, are still actually being very cooperative with unions because they do understand the value of having a representative for the workforce, right? That you can call up and talk to. So on the outside, the unions as coalitions have been working pretty well together to file various litigation in federal court challenging most of the things that Faraz just talked about, the executive order that uses the national security exemption to try to take away collective bargaining from a bunch of agencies is probably the primary example right now. It's, I think, the most egregious violation against, statutory collective bargaining that we've seen thus far. And so unions have put a lot of resources into fighting this. In federal in district court in California, and in the DC circuit, and we're kind of deciding what our strategy is going forward. So that's the I think where unions are focusing a lot right now. However, we're also, as Faraz mentioned, making sure that we're submitting comments, on all the proposed rules that take away rules that govern the civil service. There's Schedule PC, there's the suitability rule that just closed. There are a lot of comments filed on that, and that OPM, as part of the regulatory process, is required to go through the comments prior to promulgating the rule. So, there are these legal strategies, and we're using what we can in coalition with the entire labor movement to try to make sure that we keep collective bargaining in place. We make sure that the system and the structure that is there, that has been working for decades, it continues to be there, because it works for both union membership and workers and agencies, right? To make sure that we have a functioning government that serves the American people. And then kind of, the last thing that's not a litigation strategy, but I think is just as important, if not more so, is, I don't know how many of you here know Paul Sheeran, but he always says the best solution is not a legal solution, right? So we have these legal strategies, we have the ways that we're kind of fighting by using the structures we have. But I think all that, we want to keep in mind that we need to use that as leverage to make sure that we get the message out, that, of what we're actually trying to do, because we need public support for the structure in order to be able to really fight effectively against these attacks against the civil service.
Thanks, Teresa. President Biggs, we know that the IFPTE represents thousands of scientists, engineers, and highly specialized technical professionals in our federal workforce. Do these employees have a future in our federal sector?
Yeah, yes and no. I'll just if things don't change here in the midterms, I think the answer is no, sadly. Um, uh, STEM workers are currently leaving the federal government. I mean, these are highly skilled workers. I mean, some of them are cutting edge, world-renowned scientists and engineers. Um, and they're not sticking around for this. Faraz mentioned the immigration judges. We represent immigration judges. They're leaving. They're leaving. They're not gonna. These are highly skilled immigration attorneys. They're not gonna sit around and implement a policy agenda, which quite frankly is draconian towards immigrants in this country. They're not going to implement an illegal policy directive from a rogue president, and they're leaving. I will say this: the unions, really the only group out there that's there that can save the civil service are the labor unions, and that's what we're working towards. But I was at the Apollo convention a couple weeks ago. Teresa was there too. Um, and I spoke with Everett Kelly and Lee Saunders and Randy Weingarten. We had like a little panel, the four of us. And Lee Saunders said it best: if we don't win this next election, it's we things will not, it'll be very difficult to get things back to normal. So I'll just leave it at that, Mark. I think it's going to take unions to save the civil service as we know it. It's the Trump administration is trying to turn it into an at-will employer, and trying to put in political loyalists at every position they can, including immigration judges, by the way. Um, and if something doesn't change in the next 2 years, it's going to be difficult. And I'll just say this: we have a Congress. It's Republican run. Everyone knows this. The Senate and the House. They have almost completely handed over their constitutional responsibilities as a co-equal branch of government to this president. If you think about it, he is, Faraz and Teresa just talked about the Schedule G thing he did through executive order. He does everything through executive order, everything. And this administration has decided they're also going to ignore Congress when it comes to the expenditure of money. Congress's two main responsibilities are to make law and to appropriate spending and direct the spending. This president has taken over those two roles, and this Congress has allowed him to do it. So something has to change here in the next year and a half, or our federal government as an employer and really as servicing taxpayers, I don't think it'll be the same again. So.
Thank you, Matt. Faraz, are there any legislative changes on the horizon that might alter the professional scope of responsibility for federal workers? And similarly, are there legislative changes on the horizon that might limit federal workers' labor rights?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think there's one other part of that, which is that the most direct thing that Congress has before them right now is funding the government for the next fiscal year, which starts October 1st. As Matt said, this Congress, the majority party in the House and the Senate have not lived up to their oversight responsibilities when it comes to the federal government, federal agencies, and the spending that they've approved already. And there's some concern about exactly, if we can just get members of Congress, Republican and Democrat, but really, the point being Republicans, to care about their parochial interests, their constituents, what's happening in their congressional districts in their states. We could possibly stop some of this, and I think we're starting to see a little bit of that, but clearly not enough. On the Senate side, we're seeing appropriations bills that again are a little better than the House, and it has to do with just a slight bit more bipartisanship amongst Senate Appropriations Committee's members versus the House being very deferential, House Republicans being very deferential to the Trump administration. And again, I'm not trying to make this a partisan issue at all. We work with members of Congress, so long as they work with us, and it's just right now we're running into very few Republicans we can effectively work with. That appropriations process, I think, and whether we do or don't have funding that keeps government funded at an appropriate level, or if it falls apart, is really an open question right now. We may have a government shutdown come October 1st. We don't exactly know. Matters are made a little more difficult this week because the Senate, on a partisan basis, passed a $9.4 billion rescission bill. It's fairly small, but also quite impactful. Goes after foreign aid and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting for the remainder of FY25. The Senate passes bills on a bipartisan basis generally because it takes 60 votes to get past cloture. And they passed a bill to rescind appropriations on a partisan basis. So what's the point of working in a bipartisan manner for government funding then? So we have that challenge ahead of us. More directly to the issue of the professional scope of federal workers, I think we're pretty concerned. We've seen a number of attempts this year to try to attach amendments that would go after official time. And official time is really one of the ways in the federal government. It's in the statute where unions negotiate with their agencies to have time to represent their membership at negotiations in grievances, but also in labor management partnerships and health and safety committees. To really make agencies function better. We've been able to defeat every attempt. There was an attempt in the budget reconciliation bill to have language that would have taken away official time. We've been able to push back on all of that, but we continue to see that, and I think we just have to be really vigilant on that. And again, just make the case that very plainly that in the federal government, in particular, unions, we can really talk pretty clearly about how unions are in the public interest. Unions make agencies better. With labor management partnerships, we can make agencies and agency operations a lot more effective and efficient. And it's in the interest of the union to represent their membership, to make the workplace better. That helps the agency as well. So.
You're on mute, Mark. Yep, there you go.
Sorry, thanks. Thank you, Faraz. So, Teresa, our organization, NorCal LERA, includes dozens of neutrals, both those that work in the public sector for the state of California and those in private practice. So, one of the things that we wanted to ask about is what's the status of the Federal Labor Relations Authority, and neutrals generally, how are they mediators and arbitrators reacting or readjusting to the changes in the new administration?
So that's a good question, and I wish I had an optimistic answer for you. The So as many of you know, I'm sure, a lot of FMCS, the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service that provides neutrals and, mediation arbitration services, was mostly dismantled, and then some, arbitrators brought back, and then told that they might get let go again. So they're kind of in a state of flux, as is the FLRA, which has not had a general counsel for years, going back through the Biden administration. So to your question, what's the state of the FLRA? Well, it's dysfunctional. The regional offices right now seem to be operating more or less as they were before, with some exceptions, but they have not been decimated or kind of dysfunctional for such a long time as the FLRA national office. So that's where the FLRA is. Now, when we talk about the state of neutrals, mediators and arbitrators who serve when agencies and unions have matters that go to arbitration or mediation, from what we've seen, that's been a little bit different. A lot, we have a couple places where, grievances have been proceeding as usual, and we've even had a couple grievances go to arbitration where an arbitrator, actually had a hearing. And the one I know about, or the couple I know about, they have yet to issue a decision, but everything proceeded pretty much normally. That's not necessarily the rule. In other agencies, we've seen that agencies have basically, once the executive orders came out, HR departments have said, well, we're just not doing any of that anymore. And there's no way to say, to kind of say, well, you have to. Once they say we're just not doing that, there's no recourse for unions, really. So things are kind of sitting there waiting until either litigation it pushes things loose, or everything comes to kind of a grinding halt, right? So that's kind of the answer right now. I'm not sure how much of an answer that is, but that's what's happening from what we've seen. I do know a couple of neutrals who left the FMCS, or other similar services, and have gone out on their own, and so far it seems somewhat successful because there is still a need, right? Like there is still a need for agencies and non-government employers, frankly, to have good relationships with their workforce. And so as those holes are created, I think mediators and arbitrators are kind of figuring out how to go out and help fill those needs.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Teresa. President Biggs, one final question for you, and then we'll see if we have some questions from our participants. As a member of the executive committee of the American Federation of Labor, and what is the assessment or reaction of our largest labor federation to the current state of affairs in the federal sector under the Trump administration?
Yeah, they've stepped up huge in support of federal unions, and not only affiliates of the AFL-CIO, non-affiliates as well. They have coordinated the coalition of federal unions and coordinated the legislative approach, the legal approach. Faraz and Teresa could both attest to that, and the grassroots approach to beating back these attacks on federal employees. And I mean, they did recognize right away that this is the biggest attack, the biggest union busting attack in United States history. When you take away collective bargaining rights from over 1 million workers, but they were out in front of this, and when Trump unfortunately was elected, There were multiple meetings in between the time he was elected and took office. So labor was prepared. And much respect to President Schuler and Secretary Treasurer Redmond there at the AFL-CIO for leading, and they continue to. Just yesterday, Faraz and I, we were at a big press conference on Capitol Hill. It was put together by Leader Jeffries and Congressman Golden from Maine in support of that discharge petition. Um, and Liz Schuler was there, Everett Kelly from AFGE, Randy Erwin from NEFI, myself, but there were several members of Congress. But yeah, they're there. They're out in front. They're helping to coordinate. There will be more lawsuits against that executive order that strips collective bargaining rights, and the AFL is coordinating that. IFPTE will be on the next lawsuit, I should say, but some maritime unions and such. So yeah, to answer your question, Mark, they're in the fight big time, and we're proud to be affiliated with the AFL-CIO and thankful that they're stepping up.
All right, thank you. Narida, that's all the questions that I had for our panelists here. And I don't know if there's a way to see if our participants have any questions they'd like to pose.
Well, on behalf of NorCal LERA, we do want to thank you, Matt, Teresa, and Faraz for today's session. And now let's see if there's a way to tell. If anyone has any questions, if you could please raise up your hand. And let me see. And Bernadette, if you're able to help us with this, please let me know if there's anything I need to do here because I don't see any hands up.
I don't see any hands, but Carl
Okay.
did say something here. I guess that's just a comment in the chat.
So we do have a few minutes here for questions, if anyone in the audience has any questions for our speakers.
Courtney said he has a question.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Courtney Hawkins with the SIU Local 521 Senior Contract Enforcement Specialist. So one of the impacts that we've experienced right out the gate with the gutting of the federal FCMS, Federal Conciliation Mediation Services, is we received word that they were no longer doing mediations, right? Which is an important part of the process for us in trying to get to a settlement and trying to get to a deal, along trying to avoid going through the litigious process of an arbitration. And so now that I've heard today, there's just been this on again and off again issue of, having the ability to get mediators or even arbitrators. One of the things that we had heard, and I guess this is probably a question for June because he's on here, is that here in California, SCMS has offered in certain spaces to fill in for that space. And I wanted to find out if anyone have had employers agreeing where they have, mediation through FCMS, where they have had success in their employers saying, well, we would agree to go to SCMS for mediation. And if so, or if that's even something that's really being done, it's just a rumor that we've heard, we haven't had to do it yet. So maybe June or someone can answer that. And then secondly, we also received word that the Cornell ILR school is offering conflict mediation services. And I wanted to see if anyone had utilized that and had any experiences with that.
So this is June Payoyo. And so, Courtney, I can answer as far as state mediation filling the void for FMCS in California. SMCS has been doing since March grievance mediations with FMCS's blessing. The latest that we have been told, that SMCS has been told, is that our sister national organization is handling only impasses with 250 employees in the company. Everything else in California, they're referring to SMCS. With only 11 mediators, which includes our director, most of the time you're going to have virtual grievance mediations. Occasionally, if there's something that's complex and the party specifically requests a traditional in-person on-site mediation proceeding, we will do our best to accommodate. Okay, I will tell you personally, I'm already in the hotel industry with Unite here and am chomping at the bit to travel either to San Francisco or San Diego or Monterey. Folks, I live outside of Fresno, California, where it's now 110 degrees. So get a little respite from the heat is part of the perks in making house calls.
Thank you for that, June.
Did that answer to your question, Courtney?
Yeah, that does confirm, the information that we have in our offices regarding SCMS, kind of trying to fill in that space the best they could. And the other part is just the Cornell ILR school. If they are actually, if anyone has utilized them in conflict mediation and any successes one way or the other, how was that experience for them?
I can tell you, as far as SMCS goes, we've used them as trainers for our staff in conflict resolution. If you go to their website, they have a fantastic library for personal development, self-initiated personal development, and give me a call, Courtney, and I can or go to our SMCS website on the PERB web page.
Okay.
And you can see the different things. And I have to have a caveat that things are changing constantly.
Right.
In filling that void of FMCS.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Courtney. Does anybody else have a question? Okay. If not, Narita, maybe we can thank our guests for joining us and bid them adieu to go back to the good fight.
Absolutely. So again, on behalf of NorCal LERA, we want to thank you so very much for your time and the excellent information that you've provided to us today. So again, thank you very much.
Yeah, Narita, Mark, thank you very much. Hey, if y'all need anything on our end, anything, just reach out to us. We're easy to get. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, President Biggs. Thank you, Teresa, and thanks, Faraz.
Y'all take care now.